criminal justice reforms, also veterans' rights, and right now it seems like I'm doing firefighter and law enforcement rights as well. So I am helping with various bills and drafts and legislation. So when there's sex offense bills that do come in, guess who gets the first call? But I enjoy what I do. I love it very much. Gail?
I'm Gail Colletta. I'm the president of the Florida Action Committee. I hail here from Florida. I'm also the legislative chair for our organization.
I'm David Garlock. I'm on the board of directors for NCRSOL. I'm on the board of directors for PARSOL, formerly incarcerated. I've done a lot of work in legislation in Pennsylvania around life without parole and geriatric parole. I was also involved in doing some work in DC in 2019 and 2020 when we were working to restore the Pell Grant for people that are incarcerated.
All right, very good. I didn't give you timings on that, and you did wonderful. I think everybody was under a minute. Okay, so here's.
Wait, do we have more time then?
We'll save it for the big questions. All right. So the first question I have has to do with messaging. The handouts that our room host has been passing around, one of them has to do with VPSA, and that's the Value, Problem, Solution, Action. We won't be going into it, but I'm handing it out for you to review more later. The question is, the whole idea of VPSA is you lead your discussion with a shared value. So you have to know the person, so you know what that shared value is. You follow that with a stated problem, offer a solution to the problem, and then you always make sure to close with a recommended action. And so that's just kind of the flow. So the question then is, it seems to tie in well with the kind of work that we need to do in the legislature when we are approaching all the variety of lawmakers that we may need to talk to. Do you agree? And how do you determine what approach you would take with your, with the different lawmakers that you speak to?
I'm just trying to understand the question a little bit
Yeah.
better.
Well, okay, I started by just sort of saying we've got the VPSA approach.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of feel like I'm rambling. So then does that work? Something like VPSA, do you use that? And how do you achieve that basic messaging process? That help a little?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go beyond VPSA, but I just wanted to set the stage.
Well, look, VPSA is wonderful if you understand it and you are familiar with it, and hopefully you are out there or will be. But I would also say, for me speaking to the legislature, it really depends on two values. One, do I have 2 minutes on the clock before a committee, or do I have maybe a 15-minute before sitting with the legislator, a senator or so forth? And also, I have to really do my due diligence to know the audience, meaning knowing what I'm talking to. Is a Democrat and is that person in charge of this committee? Or is it a Republican and they're the chair of this committee? Or maybe is it a new person that's involved and they just don't know anything about us? So this is why the elevator pitch is important, to introduce who I am, what I represent, why I'm really here today, and here's my concern. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm not going in with here's my cue cards of everything I want to say to them, and I don't sound authentic. I don't sound like Dwayne. I sound like this. So I will go in typically and say, Senator, Representative, you're from such and such county, and you have so many people on the registry, and how's it really affecting you? I really want to get a gauge, a thermostat of how this is affecting them. And most of the time I'll find out, I didn't even know I had that many registrants in my county. Or I didn't even know anything about the registry. Or I voted for that damn bill and I don't like these registrants and I want them all out, and so forth. Everything is going to be tweaked and changed. There's no secret recipe to that. So sometimes it's knowing when to fight your battles and then knowing when to fight with information. So that's one issue that I deal with there. But when you're going in and you have an agenda, make sure your agenda is very quick, very succinct, and it's not overloaded with a lot of data that they're like, so why did that guy come in here and what was the issue at hand? Find out if there is an issue or a bill. If there's no issue, then you're a grassroots person. If there is an issue, then you're working against a piece of legislation or for a piece of legislation. So go in a little bit prepared, and if you're not prepared, then just go in and say the simple thing. Here's the bill, and I vote no, and walk away.
Yep.
The message is loud and clear. No. Use your theatrics at that point. So, I'll divert.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I go in and meet a legislator, if it's the first time I'm meeting a legislator and it's in his office, you typically, in Florida, when I get an appointment with a legislator, especially for the first time, I get about 15 minutes and I can sit down and explain who I am, why I'm there, and what work we're doing. And then I want to know what they know about our issue. How informed are they? Do they understand the bills that are being worked on or that have already been presented? I like to find out a little bit about the legislator before I go in, like what's his background or her background, where did they go to school, where are they married, do they have kids? It tells you, when you look at their bios, it'll tell you if they're a Christian, if they're Jewish, if they're Muslim, it'll tell you that. So you kind of have a sense of where they're coming from. I find that depending upon the particular legislator and the circumstance, if I'm overly emotional when I talk to them, they shut down. It doesn't work for me at all. And others, I find that if I go in and I'm all business, they think I'm really removed from the issue, so they don't take it as seriously or to heart. So it's kind of being able to gauge. When I provide them information, I've learned from my own experience, giving them too much, not asking for something specific, or not sticking to a single issue that you want to address as the problem. We know how vast it is, but stick to one issue. Because they're really easily confused because they've got a lot of different bills they're supposedly looking at. But you can find out very quickly if you are going in there to address a specific bill, if they've read it. And very often, they have not. And even when you're going in, perhaps, and meeting with the bill sponsor because you want to talk about certain things, you want to know what the impetus was for them to get involved and write this bill, many of them really don't understand all of the issues, and they haven't even considered what the collateral consequences of their legislation might be if it's passed, and how it's going to be implemented. So those are things you can try to find out. And going through that process, some of them may stop and think and say, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that.
And to go along with what my panelists have also said too, is when you're doing the research about the legislator, look at the different bills that they have sponsored. Look at the bills that they have co-sponsored so you can see where they are on these issues, you know. That's definitely very important. Dwayne was talking about data. It's good to bring up some data, but what they really enjoy is if you have fact sheets to send them afterwards. And always do follow-ups. Reach out to the chief of staff afterwards, because you want to, this is about creating a relationship. Most legislation takes years to do. In Pennsylvania, we had a training that we went through for the role I had. And in this training, we were told that it took 6 years for most bills to get passed in Pennsylvania. 6 years is a long time. And so some of these bills, that's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be this thing where we're just constantly pushing. And this is about relationship. This is about them seeing your face, knowing who you are. And each time you're going in there, you know, let them get to know more about you. Stories are so powerful. You know, I always tell people, data makes you think, stories make you feel.
All right. very good. All right, we're ready for the next question. I'm finding Mr. Dubling very distracting. I don't know if there's anybody that can go tell him to turn it down.
Just yell objection.
Yell
and-
objection?
yeah.
Oh, okay, will that carry over there? I don't know.
I could make a carryover there.
No, it's fine. All right, the next question. How much time do each of you spend working behind the scenes with lawmakers and staff? Whether that's bills, the relationship building you've mentioned, whatever it may be, and how would you describe that work? Is there any way to turn his volume down over there?
Tell them to shut up next door.
Paul's loud. I don't know if you can do anything about it. Anyway, so, how would you describe that behind the scenes work? Because I know everybody does at least some of it, of the three of you up here.
All right, so real quickly, I'm just going to pick on Bill 360 from North Carolina. If I had 120 senators, 120 representatives, which is in the House of North Carolina, and 100 senators in the Senate of North Carolina, that would equate to 3,300 minutes of time that at least if I had 15 minutes of time for each one per week.
We'll get that.
Week. It's impossible. So research time. With the bill, the first thing I would do is take the bill, put it into the computer, and turn it around and turn it into a Word document that I can work with because I want to redraft the bill. But now I've got to figure out what's a workable situation. Having those meetings, coming up with different types of talking points, finding out if they're and researching other things. So I spend on average per bill, and I'm guesstimating probably 80 hours of work goes into the bill by me. This is not the committees or any other reports or so forth to dissect to see if we already have existing and so forth. It's a lot of work behind the scenes. Does that mean you have to do that? Absolutely not, but it will give you an idea of how much work does go preparing something, or at least amending it. So there's no perfect answer to this because, again, it depends on the severity of the bill.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about if there's damage is going to be done at this point.
Then how much time do you spend, say, with the lawmaker versus?
The lawmaker depends on if it's the chair of the bill, meaning the sponsor of the bill, then I try to spend at least 30 minutes, nothing more. If it's the co-sponsor, it's at least 15 minutes. Anyone else beyond that is probably less than 3 to 2 odd minutes because I have other bills in the hopper that I want to work with as well. Sometimes I'll intertwine other bills that has nothing to do with sex offense that talks about funding for education, and I'll say, well, shouldn't we have some education funding on this? And then I'll twine in something. If you vote for this, then please vote no for that. And it kind of confuses them, but it sets the pattern of a trickery that they will actually vote no on something they probably were intended to vote yes. So I try to leave them with something less to work with.
All right. Gail?
What I have found is that it's not just about working with the legislator once you've got a bill in hand. It's about building that relationship, and you'll get a lot more time with the legislator if you can go and see them in their office as opposed to seeing them at the Capitol. When I go and see a legislator, typically in their office, you get 30 minutes. And if they don't have a lot on their calendar and things are going well, I mean, I've actually sat there 45 minutes, an hour, can I get you a cup of coffee? So it's having that comfort level to go in. The staff has the legislator's ear. If you can get in good with the staff and they know who you are and you're always, hello, how are you? Gee, I know you're so overworked. And they give you their ear and they like you and you can get them to understand your issue. If it's a legislator that you haven't met, their staff is the one that's going to get you in there. They're the ones that are going to get your material over. So it's very, very important not to overlook them. And that's a lot of the work that goes in before even getting to the actual legislator, if it's your first time. Once you have a relationship in the office with their particular office, I find that you're going to be able to kind of read the way things work, who are the people in the office that are working on the types of issues for that legislator that might have to do with things that are important to us. Do things like, I have a legislator that over time we realized that we had other things in common and we bonded, and I would come up every morning early to the Capitol and we'd pray together before we started our day. And there was kind of a whole different bonding going on because we saw each other as people. He understood my issues a little bit more, recognized, gee, you know, I actually have a family member that, you know, has a neighbor or has, and it's interesting, and you become a resource also. We get calls from legislators and say, hey, one of my constituents just got arrested for, and now we don't know where the guy is going to live, or can you refer me an attorney? And that's when you know, like, the relationships you're building. So recognize that they're people too. You know, you have families, oh, you have teenage sons. You know, let me tell you, you got to keep them off the internet. Don't be letting them search for porn, because they search based on the words they use. They put the word girl in there because they want sexting naked girls. They're getting kids. Your kid's going to get, and they're, you know, so there's a lot of education. There's a lot of just being people with them builds that relationship. Then when there is something or you need something, and you make a phone call to their office, they're going to take your call, they're going to give you an appointment, they may even start to help you and introduce you to other legislators. I've had LAs pick up the phone, oh, you know who you need to go to? You need to go see Senator so-and-so. Let me call his LA and get you in there right now. So it's being able to do that, and when they realize your sincerity and you become informed and not wasting their time, but you're bringing something, and I don't mean bringing them cookies and baked goods, because you can't do that in Florida.
Can't do that in Florida.
Right. But it puts you on another level with them. It's more humanized, is what I have felt. I'm not a professional officer.
Thanks.
I mean, I really go along with what Gail said and Dwayne about the relationships. You know, there's a representative in Pennsylvania who, when we first started working with him, you know, was kind of standoffish, but then he's come around in some of the issues, you know. And there's a day I was in the Capitol and I'm just walking in, I see him, I'm like, hey, Rep. Jones. He comes over and gives me a hug. I'm like, huh? I'm like, I wasn't expecting this, you know, but that's the relationships, you know. Yes, I'm coming in there working on these issues, you know, but we've created a bond, you know, and those bonds are really important, you know. And as Gail was saying, you know, it gives you preferential treatment at times, you know, where they'll let you know different things are going on. I'd say some more stuff as far as what Dwayne is saying, as far as like the sponsors and co-sponsors. You also have to really know where that bill is going to be. What committee is it going to be? Is it in the judiciary? And those are individuals that you're going to focus on too. So sponsors, co-sponsors, and then whatever committee is going to be in the House and the Senate, or whatever your different things are called, because I know not everybody's called the House of Representatives, you know. And so it's really about knowing who you're going into, you know. And at times, it's going to have to be about education. Because as Dwayne says, you know, one of the questions you want to ask is like, what do you know about the registry? Or what do you know about this issue? When we were in D.C., we were able to set up some meetings. Randall and I met with some of our representatives, staffers. And we asked them, what does your representative know about these issues? And they're like, we really have never talked about any of these issues. So we were able to start educating them about the registry and different things there. They're like, okay, what is your ask? And we particularly didn't have an ask right there because there wasn't a bill currently about the registry on a national level. But what our ask was that when there is bills coming in front of you as far as criminal justice reform, do not allow carve-outs. And that's something that's really important, you know, because when we look at Amendment 4 in Florida, when it began, there weren't any carve-outs, but then the 2 carve-outs came out for people who've committed murder and people who are forced to register. So it's important for us to have that conversation where we're saying no carve-outs on any criminal justice reform bills.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Back to one of the handouts that we've got there. The handout contains some tips for analyzing and drafting testimony. And they're not going to comment on that particularly, but what is your advice in terms of your own experience, in terms of analyzing and drafting testimony, given, of course, that nobody here except Dwayne here has a lot of legal background. I assume there's nobody else legal here today. Don't think any of the attorneys are at this one. You're not going to be able to do that in depth, but again, what advice would you give for analyzing a bill and then drafting those bullet points, the testimony?
Analyzing is not overthinking, is what do you see and how could that affect, not you, but how could it affect others? When I analyze something, the first thing that comes to mind is called collateral consequences. If you're not familiar with collateral consequences, think of losing your driver's license because you have a DUI. But now the collateral consequence is how you're going to drive to work, how you're going to go grocery shopping, how you're going to pick up the kids from school, why are you still paying for car insurance on a car you can't drive? It's all the other things. It's a consequence of one thing or another. So analyzing that's your bullet points. Those are your talking points. So you start analyzing how this affects somebody, and you think deeply and critically of how it could affect a group of people. And then what's going to happen later down the road if something else is added to this. So what you're doing is trying to put a hard stop to something. And you're coming up with something very clever, very unique, very simple that allows your legislator to, because you're giving them the talking points you want them to say. So I would, without trying to reinvent the wheel on that one, I would say analyzing is more like just using some common sense to not overthink and how would it affect you? How would it affect others? How would it affect us? How does it affect the future? And when does it begin? Is it retroactive? Is it starting? The other thing is a lot of us, when we analyze things, we look at the law. We really look at the law. Oh, this is horrible, a critical law. I look at the finance. So anytime that someone says, hey, we're going to get tougher and do all these random house checks and so forth, the first thing I think of, how many deputies are going to have cars that are going to have gas at $3.50 a gallon driving out with tires and all these other things, plus overtime or pay for them to go out there? How many officers are now off the street because they're having to do with this type of sequential checks and so forth? And I came up with one county, my county in Wake County, North Carolina, that I said the Sheriff's Department's going to be spending a little over $2.7 million extra annually because this is the budget that you have based upon the number of registrants we've got. Guess what? That was gone. Money killed the bill. So don't forget how to analyze there.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
Great, thank you.
I agree with everything he said, spot on. Understand the bill, and if you don't understand the bill, ask somebody. Don't make assumptions, don't leave yourself in a position that, you think you're upset about something because of what you think it means. Find out. Usually when you read a bill, it puts in the statutes that it affects. We go and cross-reference, look at the statute, make sure you understand what is in there, and when developing the talking points, I agree with Dwayne, you got to keep it simple, because if it's complicated or it's convoluted in any way, the legislator is not going to be able to use it, and then he's going to be on the spot because he's probably not going to understand it and be able to explain it to somebody else. So you need to keep it simple. What I found is that when I initially got involved in this, that I thought it meant something, and I went and I spoke to a legislator about it, and I said, this bill is going to do this, 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 and this. And he said, it is? Let's read the bill analysis. And this was the first time that I realized, oh, look at this. On their site, they have an analysis on the bill.
Yep.
Read it, said, okay, but gee, that doesn't seem right, because this isn't in there, this isn't in there, and this isn't in there. And this past legislative session, bless you,
Bless you.
at this past legislative session, we realized that in one of the bills, that was a really big deal, they didn't put in a lot of the information that really was in the bill and what this bill was really going to do. So we started making phone calls, and we called staff, and we got to the department the committee that does the bill analysis, and we sent them all the information. And then we just started doing press releases because they ignored the information completely, and we put it in a press release out there saying the legislature is about to, vote on this bill, which is anti-family, which, does this. It's ignoring the Constitution. It's ignoring 2 cases that already have precedent in our circuit for this and for this.
And
So,
yeah, add a little more, because I think this is important. And
Yeah.
Dwayne, if you had something more you would have liked to add, feel
Yeah.
free.
Yes,
And
you
then-
guys can have my time for this.
and then what we did is we kept harping on it. We put it out there in the public. We started calling, and when we would call the committee members that were going to see these bills, we called them. We told them, are you aware of this case? And are you aware of this case? And this has already been ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Why are you going to force our population to levy a lawsuit and spend all this money? And then you're going to have to fix all this after you spend all this money. It doesn't make any sense. You start to give them the information. And one of the things that I think is so important is be a resource.
Right, yes.
Be a resource. Become someone that when they're stuck about something and they're not sure, they're going to call you and say, hey, how is this really going to affect you? I don't understand. And the other thing that I've learned very recently is that there's a lot of duplicity. So they're going to have something, or even contradictions. They'll have something in this bill that's being proposed and nobody's kind of picked it up, or they just don't care. But it's already in a statute, and it's doing exactly the same thing. Or wait a minute, this statute is saying this, now you're going to do this, does that counteract that? How does that work? So now you have to address that. Why didn't they pick it up? So there's a lot of moving parts, and don't just think that one person is going to review the bill for you on your behalf and
Right.
give you everything you need. Read it yourself, let others read it, have a conversation, come up with talking points. And if you don't understand it, ask.
Right.
Yeah. But one thing I'll add, just on, you were talking about the keep it simple. The KISS principle is definitely very important.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Everybody know what KISS means?
You
Keep
know,
it simple,
keep it simple,
stupid.
stupid.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you go try to talk to people like Gail was saying. Maybe you've got an attorney, somebody that you can talk to, or just some legal beagle that can help you sift through sometimes very complex stuff. And they may give you pages, they may give you more stuff that just confuses you more. But once you've figured out what they're saying, you still have to turn it into your language, right? So those bullet points have to be at your level, because pretty good chance that most of the people you're talking to are also at your level. Now, I don't know about you, but in my state, the judiciary,
Right.
they tend to, a lot of them are attorneys, but that doesn't mean they've read the bill and can understand it. So it's still a good idea.
Mostly former prosecutors.
Mostly former prosecutors. Well, we've had a lot of defense attorneys in ours, but then I've got a Democratic state, so
Right.
what can I say? Anyway, it pays to go ahead and have it at a layman's level when you do your bullet points.
Right.
So I was just going to add that to the thought. So if you don't know what you're writing down, you might want to dumb it down further, at least for your talking points. Did you have anything else you
I
wanted to add?
yielded my time to you.
Yeah, he's
No.
yielded your time, but if you have anything else to add.
If
you don't, then I'll move on.
Go ahead. I had it on my brain, but it just slipped by.
dear.
Keep going.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on to the next question. And if it pops back, then we can circle back to it. That's fine. All right, the next question. Oh, did you
I got
remember it?
it. Yes.
Good. Just in time. All right.
Media. at every legislative location, there is some sort of media correspondent or somebody representing your local newspaper or a paper or your affiliate for your local CBS, ABC, whatever. There's somebody there. They're a legislative correspondent, and ours is Laura Leslie at Channel 5. She already has an inside scoop of everything that's going around and how it's really kind of affecting, because guess what? They're going to put it on the news somehow, or if it's newsworthy. They're your good source of analyzation too. Use the media as your pocket. I go through and I say, Laura, I got this bill. Have you heard anything about it? And she will tell me, well, I can't reveal my sources, but I have spoken with several people and this is what they've said. And then I'll go, you've given me their talking points. Now I can go through and disarm those talking points.
Good.
Don't forget the media. They are all over that place.
Cool.
So,
Thanks. That's a good one.
Very good.
All right. So the next
Yes,
question.
very good.
You approve, David. The next question. This is an easy one. Well, it's easy to ask anyway. So, what are your best suggestions for trying to kill a bill, or at least reduce damage? Because sometimes you're just not going to kill it. So, what are your best suggestions for killing a bill or attempting to kill a bill?
it's going to sound like, well, it really depends, but sometimes I try to use the approach of reverse psychology. Go ahead and pass the bill. I'm all for it. Let's build this thing up. Because there's no place on earth for these people. I know it sounds like a bit of sarcasm, but I'm just going, all right, I'm biting, I'm taking along. I want to see what train rail you're going to put me on. I'll have that uncomfortable conversation, but I want to kind of find out where it's really going with this. So I'll bite. Why is this bill really important to you, meaning the sponsor? And most of the time, it's never a constituent, or it's never somebody. It's just a matter of they need to be reelected. And I will say sometimes, especially with the Republican side, we're in a supermajority in North Carolina. For me to kill every bill that we've had this session, we started with 6, there is 0. 0. Everything is dead in North Carolina for the second year in a row. No bills. Now it means there'll be 4 bills when I get back home. But the first thing I'll do is I'll go in and I'll say, did they just elect you to go through and do sex offense bill, or are you here to do gay rights and abortion stuff? Your constituency is going to be more mad when they find out you've spent a little bit of time dealing with this petty issue. I dumb it down, and then you're not dealing with abortion or transgender and so forth. Look, I represent LGBT, and I'm very much on pro so forth, but I don't carry my agenda there. I carry your agenda, and I will do everything I can to keep your agenda on the table. So I try to go through and say, this is just not really worthy. Let's just go ahead and table it, meaning it will be killed. Table means it sits on the table and never moves. And that's exactly what happens. It gets killed. It's no longer relevant. And you know what? They forget about it. They forget about it the next legislative session. I don't try to remind them. But I've got a copy of the bill, but now I have a copy from the last session, and next session I can rewrite everything I want, and I'll give them a constitutionally sound bill that makes it sound like they have just sold something that's very tough and is completely worthless. It's like putting a traffic light up in a corner, and nobody's ever going to stop, and nobody's ever going to get a ticket.
Yeah, put up a traffic light.
But that kind of works for us in North Carolina. This is what's working now. I'll just leave it at that. Keep going.
All right.
Remember, there's always new people in the legislature. They get elected, they lose elections, so it's trying to understand from them what they understand about the bill. If you're going to try to kill it in a one-on-one and talking to the legislator. If it's a newer legislator and this is their first session, I find that it's actually easier to try to educate them and to give them some information to help them to vote no if it's something you want to kill. But I think for us, one of the most effective ways of doing this is to just there's power in numbers.
Right.
So they need to hear from the constituency what they think. If they have a bill that they get 100 calls on that their constituency is happy about it, oh, this is good, vote yes, vote yes, vote yes, and they get 2 calls saying, oh, this bill is terrible, vote no, guess what they're going to do? So it's like not to let up, not to give up. I mean, ideally, you want to get in front of the bill sponsors. You want to get in front of all the committee members that, that are going to vote on this, because if it dies in committee, it doesn't get to the next committee. But ultimately, everyone in the legislature, and for us in Florida, that's 160. We got 40 in the Senate, 120 in the House. And you've got to get to everybody. So you can do emails, you can do phone calls, you can do, there are people that don't really want to speak. The folks to get up to Tallahassee on a regular basis and be up there to testify before every committee. And when you do testify before a committee to kill a bill, be prepared, be professional, stick to the point. Chris went for the first time for us this year, and he was a rock star. It's just a matter, it's really just a matter of understanding what's happening in that session, what your abilities are, because they might not be the same session after session after session. So have multiple tools in your toolbox and multiple people, and motivate your base to get in there. Voices count, numbers count. And they look at it as one call is 100.
And when you're talking about those constituents, make sure that the constituents are from the county where that representative or senator is. A lot of times you have lobbyists who are going to go talk to a senator or representative, but they don't live in that county. Do you think that representative or senator cares about that person? No. So if you're going in, have somebody from that county to talk with that representative or that senator, because it's the constituent, it's the vote that matters. I'd also go back to something that Dwayne was talking about earlier. When you're talking about trying to kill a bill, one of the biggest places to go to is talk about money. Some of the work we've been doing in PA as far as trying to abolish life without parole and create a geriatric parole is the amount of money that it costs to house elderly people in prison. And those are issues where, you need to know where the legislator stands on certain issues, and how to come to them, and what is those talking points that they're going to listen to. And that's pretty much what I have. You want any more time, Dwayne?
I'll throw something in there that's a real bill. So the question that we all have on the panel, right, was how do we kill a bill? What if you can't kill it? All right, here's my answer to that. This is a real bill, and it went through its first reading, and it was anyone that has a sex offense that's been arrested will not be provided bail or parole. I mean, not parole, but the way of not probation, but what is it? Bail. They won't be provided bail. It'd be held without bond.
Held without bond.
So what I did is I took the thing and I rewrote it, and it now says at the bottom, the judge will determine, because what we want is due process. I put in a due process, simple statement, gave it back to him and said, you can still have this bill and I support it if you'll put this in there. And now this bill just passed. The bill that we didn't want, the one we want to kill, think about how to make it alive, but change one word. It said, will not. Now it says it's up to the judge to determine if you'll have it. So I'm always an opportunist. I look at everything, there's good where there's evil. We just have to find it. So I'll just leave it at that.
I want to add something
Yeah,
to
go
that.
ahead,
So when you're looking at a bill, like Dwayne is saying about changing something, sometimes it's as simple as getting them to change a word from shall to may.
Right.
Because shall makes it mandatory, may means it, could.
That can help.
Right.
So understand language.
Yep, absolutely. I think one of the successful times when we advocate, when I was advocating, and it was pure luck because I'm not as involved as you, especially as you two are, but we had passed a bill, we had passed the AWA the year before, and we were back to fight another bill, and I managed to have an audience with the chair of the committee. It's very powerful. And I just commented to him. I said, the one thing that would be really great is if we could just take out, and there was already a bill on the table doing something else, right? And I said, if we could just get rid of that god-awful retroactive thing where if somebody gets a D